Alright guys, it's Sunday on board the USS Armageddon and unfortunately, the situation is getting from bad to worse. For today, we have to focus on China and the US. The two biggest economies are decoupling. Now, Trump has made it very clear that China isn't going to escape his tariff war. And if you think inflation is over, it's time to brace for impact here. The US is going to weaponize their consumer market against China's economy. On February 1st, China could be hit with an additional tax of 10% on top of existing tariffs. In just a week, we could be facing disaster. So if the tariff rate on steel is 50%, the new rate now will be 60%. EVs from China would face a 110% tariff as well. And we must talk about the dangerous effects of a US-China trade war. The interdependence between both economies is huge, but it would be the US who will lose out more in both the short and the long term. Now understand that Beijing won't back down. They have already imposed a tariff on US plastics or copolymers coming into the Chinese market. It's already in effect today, and the rate is 74.9% for US companies. This is most definitely a retaliation and a warning shot. This gives us a big hint on how China is going to approach the trade war. Now, the plastics are those used in EVs and electronics, so they are industrial inputs. But it does tell us the industries Beijing will retaliate against is going to those where China has developed near self-sufficiency, or they can easily find alternatives too. China wants to reduce the impact on their own industries, and that's priority number one. You can't boost domestic demand if prices suddenly fly up or jobs get lost. Stability is key here. China today produces a lot of petrochemicals that they need. From propylene to methanol and glycol, production capacity is more than their consumption. That's why Beijing can slap a big tariff and hurt US plastics exporters. They simply don't need exports from America. When China decides to cut off an entire industry, the effects ripple through the entire supply chain. Now just think about it. What do you need to make plastics? Well, you need the base inputs to make it happen. US exports of ethane to China has been rising since 2020. It has gone from zero to nearly 10,000 barrels a month. Well, that could drop to zero because China has the most refineries in the world and producing their own isn't a problem. So oil companies in the US are at risk of getting clobbered. Now we know Trump wants to make big oil rich again, but if China retaliates, it's going to get that much harder. The US doesn't export many products to the world anymore. Most of them are services. So having more buyers for your production of physical goods is extremely important. Over the past few months, we have talked about how US gas imports are flying up. Trump's economy is the biggest seller of natural gas to the world, especially when it comes to LNG. In 2024, the US exported over 88 million tons of LNG. That's 5% more than the year before. So business is good and US gas is selling like hotcakes. And guess who's a major buyer? We know Europe is buying a ton of US LNG. Other US allies like Japan and South Korea, they are big buyers as well. But this will surprise you. China buys from the US as well. From 2026, Chinese imports are going to soar to the moon. They will be buying 14 million tons, which is a tremendous amount. And remember what Trump wants to accomplish here. He wants to unleash US energy and export gas to all regions of the world. Let's not forget that. Imports from the US have grown by 63% last year, which gives Beijing tremendous leverage against the US. And if we enter a brutal trade war, this is one card that China would most definitely play. Now, this leverage has been built over the years and decades. China's buying US LNG as part of their diversification strategy. And that's why they are also buying gas from Middle Eastern suppliers like Qatar. But if push comes to shove, we best believe that China will weaponize their gas demand as well. US exports to China could drop to zero. Now you might be thinking, won't that destroy China's economy? Ironically, it won't because China has Russian gas supply which is abundant and incredibly cheap. In 2024, China has already surpassed the EU as Russia's top pipe gas buyer. This is supply coming from Siberia through the pipelines. So there's a direct connection, there's no ships needed and prices are extremely cheap. They have also completed building the world's largest gas pipeline with the Russians. So China can get all the supply they need up north. And by now, we know the Chinese economy isn't just powered by oil and gas. China has developed a robust energy mix that includes nuclear power and a ton of renewables. In May last year, 44% of China's power generation came from clean energy. The rest came from coal and just a bit from natural gas. We can see this big slide in fossil fuels and a big leap ahead in renewables. We could reach a tipping point where the majority of Chinese manufacturing is powered by clean energy. And once we understand this, we know China doesn't need energy imports from the US at all. They could theoretically go cold turkey and ramp up renewable power while importing fossil fuels from the BRICS members. And that's why Trump waging a tariff war with China isn't really a smart idea. He has to find a way to coexist and find a way to work with Chinese industry. Now, when it comes to Biden's semiconductor curbs, I can at least understand that, right? The US, they want to maintain their technology lead against Beijing. But trying to confront the entire Chinese industrial machine is very dangerous. Over the next few years, China's middle class is going to expand a lot. Now, just take a look at this chart of China's rising power demand. In 2025, it's going to reach over 10,000 terawatts. The country has a lot of urbanization left. Less than 50% of people are in the middle class, and they have a population of 1.4 billion. China's manufacturing sector has to grow by a tremendous rate just to satisfy domestic demand. If the US decides to punish China now, they will lose access to the biggest consumer market of tomorrow. Beijing will hit back. They have said it many times before, they have demonstrated it, and the effects won't be pretty on the US economy. Anyone in any country wants the basics for themselves and the family. You want inflation to come down, you also want to find good paying jobs as well. An economic confrontation will flip the table on the US. According to the Tax Foundation, the damage to the US economy would be tremendous. And let's take the base case, which is the most likely scenario. Here's what happens when Trump imposes a 10% tariff on China and punishes both Mexico plus Canada. GDP would drop by 0.4%. Over 340,000 jobs would be lost as well. But if Trump loses it completely, the destruction would be breathtaking. A 20% universal tariff and a 60% on China will decimate the US economy. GDP would implode by 1.3% and unemployment would rise by over a million jobs. This would most likely push the US into recession. Now, this isn't a base case, but we are dealing with Trump. This is just another season of The Apprentice for him. But look carefully at the impact on China. It would be hardly affected. Like water off a duck's back, GDP would fall by only 0.1%. Job losses would hardly even register, just 58,000 jobs gone. Now, will China's economy hurt? Yes, it most definitely would. But the US economy could get clobbered multiple times harder. And that's what happens when you are running a huge trade deficit and you manufacture very little. Now, during the Davos summit, Trump basically read everyone there the riot act. He told every company in the world to leave their country and relocate to the US. And if they don't, they will get punished. The good old carrot and a very big stick warning.
My message to every business in the world is very simple. Come make your product in America, and we will give you among the lowest taxes of any nation on earth. We're bringing them down very substantially, even from the original Trump tax cuts. But if you don't make your product in America, which is your prerogative, then very simply you will have to pay a tariff, differing amounts, but a tariff which will direct hundreds of billions of dollars and even trillions of dollars into our treasury to strengthen our economy and pay down debt.
In other words, he wants to deindustrialize the world, not just Europe or Canada, my friends. Just like what Blinken said a while back, if you're not on the table, you're on the menu. Now, we've seen this a million times now. The US is not really interested in friendshoring. They are interested in reshoring, and Trump just confirmed this. Very big difference. Trump wants to mirror what Beijing has. Many foreign brands, including Tesla, have factories in China to manufacture their products. And from there, the goods are either sold into the Chinese market or shipped to the rest of the world. Now, Trump wants this for the US economy. But there's a problem with his approach. Steelmakers in Canada and Mexico are starting to refuse new US orders. American companies are trying to buy steel from them, but Mexican and Canadian steelmakers, they are saying no. Many of them are outright pausing sales to the US, and it's all because of the tariffs. If Trump decides to impose duties, the pricing could suddenly change for US steel buyers overnight. Suddenly, the price tag could jump by 25%, which is an enormous markup. And if that happens, a ton of crazy things could occur. Customers can suddenly cancel their orders, and all the steelmakers they'll be left in the lurch. The losses could be massive. So there's enormous risk dealing with American businesses today through no fault of their own. It's because of the government. Steel is a very important input. US companies use it to make everything from electronics to cars to a new toaster. Cheap Chinese steel already can't come in. Why? Tariffs, right? And with this disruption, what does it do to steel prices? It drives everything up. Now the cost of production of US goods goes even higher. And this puts the economy in a quandary. Exports will drop because American exports are more expensive today. Very basic. Now, can the domestic market absorb it? Sure, but it would mean buying the same item at a higher price. So inflation goes up. And you can kind of see what I mean here. Everyone loses, especially the US. Now, listen to these two statistics from the Federal Reserve themselves. It tells you immediately how Trump's plan is going to backfire. 5% of the cost of production of US goods and services are from intermediate imports, and these are the inputs like steel and aluminum. If countries retaliate, this will most definitely jack up the cost of production for US industries. There's no dodging this. According to the St. Louis Fed, tariffs will hurt American manufacturers. 22% of total spending on intermediates comes from purchases abroad, in other words, imports from the world. Now, I'm not sure how well Trump knows his global tariff plan. Some companies would reshore from Europe to the US, I've no doubt about that. Japanese companies, some of them, would also head to the US. But there's a good chance that the net effect is still negative for America. US companies might lose more in the process. Exports to the world could drop, and if you live in the US, you will be footing the bill for this. To buy American means paying more, and I'm sure Washington knows this, right? But let me know what you think. Will Trump back down or raise the stakes? And who will be the big loser here? Stay safe, be sure to smash the like button and subscribe as we navigate through these crazy times.